Thank you all for coming to our August 2025 virtual Gastroparesis Awareness Program series. This program is made possible by a grant from Intera Medical and in addition, the sponsorship of Evoke Pharma. My name is Mary Angela De Grazia De Tucci. I'm a longtime patient with gastroparesis along with other motility disorders. And it's always an honor for me to serve as a volunteer for the Association of Gastrointestinal Motility Disorders, or AGMD. AGMD serves as an educational resource for gastrointestinal motility disorders. It also is an information clearinghouse for those in the medical, scientific, and nutritional communities. And of course, it's a form of educational support for patients and their families. We're delighted to have you, and it is a privilege to have Melissa Adams VanHouten being here today and speaking on advocacy. Welcome, Melissa, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you,
Melissa,
Mary.
can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Although I'm sure most everybody here knows you already, but just give a little bit of a background.
Sure. My name is Melissa Adams VanHouten, and I am a gastroparesis patient and advocate. I was diagnosed with idiopathic gastroparesis a little more than 11 years ago in February of 2014. I currently serve as the AGMD's Public Policy and Outreach Director, and I manage a set of online gastroparesis patient support and advocacy groups. I am a wife and a mother, and right now I'm busy taking care of my daughter, Miss Lily, as she attends college, because apparently it doesn't end when they graduate from high school.
She also is a loving caretaker of a menagerie of animals.
That's true.
So, Melissa, we're very anxious to talk about advocacy and hear what you have to say and some suggestions you have. Melissa, tell us about advocacy.
Okay. So, and if I get out of control in this talk and I'm not making any sense, or you have some questions, please just stop me, because sometimes I get a little wound up and start flying through a presentation. So if I'm not making sense, just let me know. But today I want to talk a little bit about how to keep going when you feel like your efforts aren't making a difference. I think that we all sort of want to know that the work we do matters, even if that's in a very small way, because it motivates us and it gives us hope when we feel like our efforts are making a difference. But what happens when you reach a point where you kind of feel like maybe your efforts aren't producing the results you hoped for? How do you find that motivation and will to continue when you feel like what you're doing isn't working or it doesn't matter? I think there comes a point in probably everyone's advocacy where you feel this way, where you feel stuck, or you start to question whether what you're doing is having an impact. And I think that's especially pretty normal in an atmosphere and environment where you're fighting uphill for that awareness, where there are few treatments, there's no cure. And you look around you and you see people are suffering. They're struggling with this illness, and you want to see those great leaps and bounds. You want some progress being made. And when that doesn't happen, it can be pretty discouraging. So today I want to try to assess the situation a little bit, offer some tips for gauging your success, and hopefully find ways to help you sort of adjust your mindset and move forward when you're feeling stagnant or disheartened. Next slide. I feel so important when I say that. Next slide.
You are important.
So there are several areas I want to cover today. One of the first things I think we need to do is define our terms. If you're seeking success, I think you kind of have to have an idea of what your goals are and what it looks like to achieve those goals. So we'll start by taking a look at that. Then we'll look at how you might measure success. So you might feel like you're unsuccessful, but are those feelings accurate? Is there any objective measure for feeling that way? Or can we maybe find alternate ways of looking at measures of success? And then we'll try to assess whether your expectations and goals are realistic, considering your circumstances. And finally, we'll try to determine what concrete actions you can take to sort of turn things around if you believe you are actually falling short of your goals. Next slide. I think we'll start with distinguishing our goals and defining success. And just before I get started, a brief note about what the talk is not. This is not going to be a blueprint or a guide on how to choose your goals or how to establish a process for meeting them. We might touch on that just a very little bit, and I think it's an important topic, maybe one for another day. And Mary Angela's probably already thinking, yes, another day, we're going to have to do that. But the focus today, I really want to be on helping you overcome the discouragement, the frustration that you sometimes feel when you're not meeting your advocacy goals, to help you look at things differently when you're feeling stuck. I'm primarily interested in your mindset on overcoming that discouragement by developing a different perspective and seeing the connection between goals and success. So one thing that I find helpful, I find minimizes my frustration, is distinguishing between what I call macro and micro views. And what I mean by that is the big picture versus the snapshot or the small picture sort of view. And on the macro level, you're looking at goals and successes that are large scale, widespread. You can think of a macro goal as your top goal, your primary goal. So, for instance, if you want to find a cure, because that's obviously everybody's biggest goal, right? Then success would be when you have that cure. And it can be more specific than that. It could still be an overarching goal, not the cure, but an overarching goal like getting Congress to fully fund research for gastroparesis. And then success would be when that research has been fully funded. Or maybe your primary goal is to get doctors to establish nationwide protocols for treating GP patients in the ER, because I know a lot of people who have that goal. And then the macro success would be when those protocols are in place everywhere. But we're talking here about the big picture, the ultimate goals that you've set, system-wide change. So defining success at the macro level means you've achieved that highest goal, right? At the micro level, though, we're looking at smaller scale, more individual goals. You can think of them as either completely separate smaller scale goals, or you can think of them as smaller steps to the big picture goal, but it's not the big picture goal itself. So, for instance, if your macro goal is a cure, then you might have micro goals like raising funds for researchers who are working on treatments. Or maybe you would write an awareness article to point out the need for cures, something along the way to that larger goal. If the macro goal is to get Congress to fund research, then the micro goal might be I contact several congressional representatives and urge them to fund that research. Or maybe I recruit people who are willing to contact their congressional representatives to seek that research funding. If the macro goal is protocols for the ERs, like we talked about, then your micro goals might be to develop a draft of those protocols, those proposed protocols. Or maybe you would contact medical associations or organizations to try to get help with establishing those protocols, writing them and establishing them. Micro goals are not less important than macro goals. They're just at a different level. So success at this level would be defined as having accomplished one of these smaller steps, even if the big macro goal had not been achieved. And I think the beauty of this is that looking at the situation in terms of macro and micro sort of allows you to lose that all or nothing mindset. So rather than focusing only on that final ultimate result, the cure or whatever your ultimate goal is, we can look at the micro steps we've successfully accomplished along the way. And I think that helps to decrease your frustration because you feel like you're accomplishing something along the way. And what I would suggest to you is that you incorporate both those macro and micro goals into your advocacy plan. But you have to kind of understand that the micro successes are important contributions. They're important in and of themselves, and they're important as steps leading to those macro successes. So rather than thinking, I'm a failure because we don't have a cure, because Congress hasn't fully funded research, or because, the ER still treated someone poorly, you can say to yourself, hey, I was quite successful at raising money for this or that research project, or I did a great job at writing about the burdens of our community or demonstrating why we need those protocols or a cure. You can celebrate those sort of smaller scale achievements along the way to the ultimate achievement. And you're still keeping that ultimate achievement, that macro goal in mind, but you're giving yourself credit when you meet the smaller goals so that you can feel some sense of success along the way. And I also think that sort of approach, with that sort of approach, when we fail at our goals, and I'll use fail in quotation marks because I don't like that word, but it doesn't mean that failure is permanent or that it can't be overcome. When you redefine the terms so that success is not that all or nothing, not just that macro goal, but is something that's achieved in smaller steps along the way, you can easily see that falling short at one point in that process doesn't necessarily mean failure of the primary goal. And that might make you feel a little less discouraged. We can learn from those smaller shortcomings. We can improve, we can try again, or we can try something different. And that primary goal, that cure, that research funding, whatever it is still waiting out there. We don't have to see it as we've failed at that big goal. We've maybe failed at one of the smaller steps, but we can try that again, or we can try something different, and we still have a chance of reaching that macro goal. Next slide. Measuring success. Another thing you might consider is how you measure success or how you assess the impact of your advocacy efforts. If you constantly feel like you're not measuring up, it's going to be really difficult to not get frustrated. But I think that this depends at least somewhat on your perspective and your definitions of success. And one approach that I find helpful is to think in terms of the quantity of your interactions or responses versus the quality of them. And by quantity, you probably already know what I mean, but it refers to the actual measurements, the number, the datas. It's a way of measuring your efforts in very concrete or tangible terms. So, for instance, if you're looking for responses from your congressional representatives, uh, you get 20 responses from them. Now, that's not saying anything about whether they're positive or negative responses, but you get 20 responses. It's very concrete. You raised $5,000 for research in the first week of your campaign, which would be amazing, by the way. But, but it's something very concrete and measurable. 500 signatures on a petition to insist that doctors develop ER protocols, or maybe you get 100 likes or shares on some post that you've made on social media. These are very easy to measure. They're numbers. They're black and white. You either hit your goal or you don't hit your goal, right? And I think that, I'm not going to say that those numbers are not meaningful. They are meaningful. It is significant to get those numbers, right? If you get those numbers, it sort of lends you a credibility or a power, in some sense, because if I can show that I have a million supporters, for example, I'm going to look pretty good. I'm going to look pretty powerful, and it's going to look like, maybe people should listen to me because I have all these followers. It's an indication that what you're pushing is resonating with people. So I don't want to dismiss the importance of those numbers. I'm not trying to do that at all. But a lot of times I hear from people in the community who are very discouraged and convinced that they're not having any advocacy impact at all because they're not hitting those numbers. They're not getting enough likes or shares or signatures or whatever it is they're looking for. And I know how that hurts. I know how it makes you feel. I know it makes you feel like you're not being seen, you're not being heard. But when you feel that way, I think you need to take a step back and remember that the numbers are not everything. There is another measure that we can look at as well, and that is the quality of interactions that you're getting. The quality of interactions refers to something a little less tangible, a little more intangible and difficult to measure. And its value and its meaningfulness are more subjective. So, for example, when you sent your notes to Congress, maybe instead of getting 20 responses like you wanted, you only got one response from Congress. But that one response you got was from a representative that is very interested in digestive issues. Maybe he serves on the health committee in Congress. Maybe he's very willing to push for funding for your cause. So you didn't get those 20 responses. You didn't hit your quantity goal, but you did get one very helpful response, and that's meaningful. Or say you only raised $200 for research. You wanted to raise $5,000, but you only managed to raise $200 for research. However, a local paper picked up your story. Now, this wasn't your original goal, but the paper saw it, thought it was interesting, published it, and it's starting to generate interest in your cause. That's something that could aid future fundraising campaigns. And at the very least, it's spreading awareness, right? So it wasn't your original goal, but it's very meaningful because something came of it. Uh, Maybe you only got one share when you made a post about ER protocols. You wanted everybody on your friend list to share your post, but you got one share. But that one share happened to be from a very influential doctor. And maybe she can get more people on board in helping you develop those protocols. There could be a ripple effect. She could post it on her site and more people could take an interest in it and end up helping you. One response, but it was a meaningful response, right? And maybe you didn't get any likes on your post. Maybe you put up a post about awareness or something and you didn't get a single like on your post, but you did get a comment from someone. And that person said, "Thank you so much. You provided information that I couldn't get anywhere else. I'm so encouraged by what you're doing." One person, but it was a very meaningful interaction to you. It meant something to you. It showed you how much that people value that. Um, and maybe, you really are out there, that lone voice in the wilderness. Absolutely, no indication that you've reached anyone ever. But I'm here to tell you, you cannot know that for sure. I have said things before, I have posted things before that I thought went nowhere. And then somebody out of the blue will message me and say, "Hey, Melissa, I saw your post months ago and I was able to talk to my doctor about this." So I have to figure, if I'm getting one actual response like that, how many more people are out there that are seeing my posts and getting something out of it, and I just never hear from them? You really can't know. The value of these types of engagements is hard to measure. It's very hard to measure, but it's highly meaningful to you personally. It's highly meaningful in terms of where it can lead, and it's productive because it's meaningful. If it matters to you, if it's a value to you, and that value is subjective, maybe judged only by you, but it matters if it means something to you. And one impactful quality exchange can matter more than a ton of those measurable interactions, more than the quantity of interactions. It can encourage you, can make you feel good about what you're doing again. And that's as important as those numbers. And I think that the tendency is I would say most always for people to only focus on the quantity and ignore that quality. So when they fall short on those numbers, they get discouraged, they think they failed. But, I would argue that it is absolutely necessary to aim for quantity, but you have to aim for that quality too, and consider how meaningful your interactions have been, not just those numbers. And hopefully, when you look at it this way, you can find some satisfaction and meaning in what you're doing, even if you aren't producing those big numbers. And truly, honestly, you never know who you're affecting out there. You can't see the results always of that ripple effect. So even if you're not seeing it immediately, that doesn't mean you're not making a difference at all. Next slide. Setting sensible expectations. Another thing that I find helps me to minimize that frustration or that discouragement is to set realistic or sensible expectations. And I want to say right away that I know this can get tricky because you want to push the envelope, right? You want to push the boundaries. You don't want to limit yourself. You want to stretch what you can possibly accomplish. And I understand that. And that's good. That's wonderful. But I think you also have to acknowledge the very real hardships and limitations your illness and outside circumstances can place on you. Sometimes people have really idealistic expectations of themselves and others. But you have to look at the situation honestly. If I set my expectations so high that absolutely no one could reach them, and I expect to accomplish those things overnight, I'm just setting myself up for failure. No one could possibly do that. So I think you have to approach it honestly. You have to look at the practical aspects of advocacy. How much time can you spend on a project? How much money can you contribute to it? How will your health limit your contributions? And that's a huge one because I know I've done it myself. We sit behind our computer screens or on our sofa and we think we can do anything. I'm going to take over the world. and you feel that way at the moment, but then, your illness flares and you're not going to take over the world. You're going to be lucky if you're surviving. So due to no fault of your own, you're just not going to be able to accomplish those ridiculously high expectations that no one, set aside a sick person could accomplish. And then you're going to just sit back and ask yourself, why on earth did I think I could do that? And it's going to be very frustrating. So keep it reasonable given your limitations. And I think also you need to consider your reach and influence. And do you have a platform that has broad support and scope? Maybe you don't. Maybe you do, but maybe you don't. And I'm not saying you can't change that. You can't make your support and scope of reach better over time. You could certainly make progress towards that and build towards something better. But when you're initially starting, take those things into account when you're holding yourself accountable, right? And above all, I think you have to recognize that sometimes, no matter what you do or how well you do it, you are not going to convince some people. Mary Angela knows this. Some people refuse to be swayed. They refuse to act, no matter how good your arguments are, no matter how adeptly you argue them or you demonstrate your point. They are not going to listen to you and they are not going to act. And as hard as that is to accept, I think you have to understand that it is something that is beyond your control. You can only control your own actions. You cannot control the actions and feelings of other people. And the sooner you admit this and move forward, the better you're going to be. And I just as an example, something I hear all the time, family members. I live with these people. I live with them. They see what I go through every day and they still won't do anything. They don't believe me. They won't lift a finger to help me. Yes, yes, that's true. And what does that say to you? It should tell you that no matter what you do, for whatever reasons, these people are not going to be convinced. They're not going to help you. So you're going to have to move forward without them. And you're going to have to concentrate on the people who are willing to listen and the people who are willing to help you. And I think if you keep in mind those sort of hardships and limitations and recognize what's reasonable, what's sensible, and what's unreasonable, what's within your control and what's not, it will really help you with that, with keeping your discouragement in check and help you to feel a greater sense of success. One other thing, I think it's also helpful to set priorities and create a plan, just a general plan to keep you on track, so that you have a general idea of where you're going. You know what's most important to you. If you're going in all directions, if you're sort of all over the place, it's going to be pretty difficult to determine what you have accomplished. If you have a concrete plan, you can more easily see, where you've been. This is where I've started. This is where I've been, and this is where I am now. And you're going to be able to track that progress more easily. You can track and compare your actual achievements to what you had hoped to achieve. And if you don't do that, if you don't set that kind of general concrete plan, I don't know how you're going to know. It's guesswork without that, right? So to start with, I would say keep in mind those macro and micro goals and definitions of success that we just talked about, because I think that those will help you develop your plan, develop your roadmap. Um, but take those and prioritize them. And you can prioritize them in any way you want. You can base it on, what's the most significant thing that I want to do, what's the most achievable, or any other factor that you find important to you, but prioritize them. And then separate your long-term and your short-term goals and try to give them time frames. Here's when I think I can accomplish this by. So that you just have a good idea where you're headed and how long it might take you to get there. I just don't see how you can judge your progress if you don't have this type of guideline and you're not tracking your efforts to some extent. It's guesswork without it. And again, we want to keep those parameters realistic. So be very willing and ready to allow for setbacks and adjustments, because the setbacks are going to come whether you want them or not. Circumstances, resources, they change. Your illness might worsen. You might have a family crisis that's unrelated to your illness. You might have a sudden drop in financing. You might get into a time crunch because your work is demanding more, or something in your home life is demanding more. Those could change in positive ways too. I'm addressing the negative right now, but those could change in positive ways too. And you have to be ready to account for that. In either case, when things change, you want to make adjustments based on your new needs, based on your new circumstances or limitations. And if you don't do this, if you aren't willing to make those adjustments, well, then you're going to be expecting things out of yourself based on data and circumstances that no longer exist. You're holding yourself to unreasonably high expectations. So account for those changes. And one thing I find helpful to do, for example, if I've set a certain number of engagements, I want to make this many phone calls, or maybe I want to, raise this amount of money, and I'm not hitting those marks because of circumstance changes or whatever the case may be. If I take those goals and I break them down even smaller, so we talked about, micro goals. If you make, I don't call them mini micro goals or something, really concrete, small, tiny goals. So if you can't make, 100 calls a month like you originally wanted to, maybe try to make 2 calls a day for a week or something like that. Something really concrete, but way smaller. If you can't raise, $500 in a month, well, try $20 a week for a month. Whatever you can do at the moment, whatever you can do that gets you started towards that goal. And I think you'll find that, once you can meet those smaller goals, you can increase them and get closer and closer to that original goal you had, by just taking smaller steps and feeling successful as you accomplish them along the way. And someday you're going to be at a place you can live with, right? So I think, using those techniques to make sure you're setting those realistic expectations can help minimize that frustration, that feeling of being stuck, and helping when you establish that reasonable, achievable plan, it lets you know, whether you're making progress and helps you adjust and reset those expectations when necessary. Next slide. Okay, so if you take a look at the situation and you know you've tried all those other things and you've really given it your best shot and you still find that you're not making the gains you wanted and you're not meeting those goals, you're falling short, what are some things you can do after you've looked at it objectively? What are some things you can do to turn things around if you're not having the kind of success you seek? Uh, it it hurts again. It really hurts to not be noticed, to not meet the objectives you've set for yourself. But it doesn't mean you're a failure. You know, some people want to throw in the towel because they don't meet those goals initially, but it doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you're a complete failure, that you can't make a difference. It might mean, though, that you sort of have to change your perspective and your plan of action because if what you're currently doing isn't paying off for you, whether that's tangible or intangible, whether it's true or not, if you feel like it's not working for you, then you have to make some changes so that you can move forward. And I think that takes a willingness to make adjustments and to have a different perspective. Some concrete steps you can take. The first thing you might do is change your message, style, format, or platform medium. Um, Maybe the message you're sending isn't being interpreted the way you intended it. Maybe it's not resonating with your audience. Try changing the wording, try changing the tone, try changing the style so that it better conveys that meaning, so that it better appeals to your audience. Maybe your format or your layout is somehow putting people off. Try different arrangements, try different fonts, different sizes, different colors, whatever it takes to adjust whatever you're sharing and make it feel more attractive to your audience. Choose a different platform. You know, I'm heavily based on Facebook, but if Facebook isn't working for me, then I have to go looking for something else. You know, maybe I try Twitter or X or whatever they're calling it today, or maybe I try Blue Sky. If YouTube isn't working for me, and it doesn't, maybe I try Instagram or TikTok. You know, try shorter posts, try longer posts, try posts with pictures, without pictures, videos, graphics. Write a letter, make an emotional statement, put together a poem. Uh, just mix it up. You know, see what feels comfortable to you. See what's getting you the results you seek. If you're doing the same things over and over and it isn't working for you, you have to try something different. You might also try picking a new target for your message. And this could mean something, you know, as broad as I've been trying to reach the media, but now I'm going to try to reach Congress instead. It could be something like that. But let's say you want to stick with your original goals. So if you've been trying to sway Congress to get them to provide, you know, that research funding we talked about, and you're not having any success there, well, then maybe you contact the media and tell them this is my problem. This is the issue I'm trying to highlight, and Congress isn't paying attention to me. Maybe the media will pick it up. Maybe you could go to another government agency that might help you highlight your message and might have some contacts with congressional representatives. If you've been targeting your message towards medical clinics and hospitals to try to get the ER protocols in place that we talked about earlier, let's say, and you're not having any response from the medical clinics or hospitals, well, maybe you start contacting individual physicians instead. Maybe there's a doctor, like we talked about earlier, that really this cause is meaningful, and he or she would be willing to take it and help you push it. If you focused on the FDA to try to get treatments approved or something like along those lines, and that's not having any success, well, maybe contact a pharma company or a nonprofit or somebody who has better relationships or closer relationships with the FDA to try to get the ball rolling. Um, if you're looking to get your story published in the media, the national media, and you're not having any success, try your local paper. You know, maybe local media would pick it up. I've had people who have published one-page ads in their local paper, just talking about what they wanted to talk about. If you have the means to do that, why not, right? If you want to speak at conferences, if your goal is to speak at conferences and you're not having any luck there, well, start making your own videos. There's no reason you can't make your own video and post it to social media. I've done things like asked to speak at my child's school, her elementary school, and I was able to speak in her health class. You can do podcasts. There's a million ways to share your thoughts. And if what you're trying isn't helping, isn't working, then try something different. Be creative. One of the things that can help you is to focus on your strengths. If you're a writer, write. If you're an artist, draw, make graphics. If you're a speaker, create those videos we talked about. Seek speaking opportunities. Um, we have people who create surveys, who design websites, who do newsletters, they do podcasts. Wherever those strengths lie, pursue them. Hone those skills until you are the best at what you do and everybody seeks you out, right? Or or the opposite route, if focusing on your strengths isn't helping you hit your targets, or if maybe you see a niche that needs filled, but your skills in that area are not very strong, maybe you can focus on improving your skills in your weaker areas. You can take a class, you can practice at those skills. Maybe you can find a mentor in your area that can help you. I know a lot of libraries offer classes now. There are some universities, at least in my area, that offer some free or discounted classes. You can sometimes even find those classes offered by nonprofits or on social media sites and self-help organizations. I know LinkedIn has a bunch of classes now. I've just recently gotten active on LinkedIn, and they send me emails, here, practice, here's how to improve your speaking, here's how to improve your writing. And maybe I should take a few more of those. But but they're out there. You can find them now, and you can take those classes at your own pace, so you can get better at those weaker areas and fill that niche that you saw. Consider collaborating with other advocates or organizations so that you can pool your talents and skills and resources. I know that it sometimes feels very good to be that lone wolf. I often like to take the lead, make my own decisions, do my own thing, and that sometimes feels good, but it's also sometimes more effective to work as a group or a team so that you can maximize your reach and impact. If you're weak in one area, someone else is likely to be strong, and you can use this to your advantage. Try to focus on today. And I know this is just going to sound ridiculous to people, but it's the absolute truth. You can start every single morning by asking yourself, what is one small action I can do today to make our situation better? Yesterday might have gone absolutely horribly. It could have been a disaster, and you might feel like you're not making any progress at all, but you have the opportunity to start fresh every single day. Now, sometimes that light at the end of the tunnel is so far out there that you can't see it, and you might think it doesn't exist, but it doesn't mean it's not there just because you can't see it. You do what you can when you can. You let that future stay out in the future, and hopefully someday, you're going to get close enough that you can see that light. But you have to have faith that it's out there and that you can get nearer to it. And if all else fails and you really simply can't keep going, I think you need to recognize that advocacy fatigue is a real thing. It can happen. I don't like the term burnout because that sounds very permanent to me. I use the term burnout sometimes, but I think that fatigue is a better term because it's not permanent. You can take a break. You can make a new plan. You can hone those skills that we were talking about, and then you can start again when you feel fresh. Next slide. And here's really the gist of it. And I am going to read this slide to you because I know there are a lot of words, but it really is the gist of what I want to say. Ultimately, you have to find a way to feel good about what you're doing if you're going to be able to continue. And I think impactful advocacy includes developing a sense of satisfaction and pride in your efforts. And progress really begins with the messages you tell yourself and the perspectives you adopt. If you establish those realistic definitions and measures of success, set sensible expectations and goals, and make adjustments along the way, that's really going to help you avoid that burnout or fatigue, which is the term I prefer, improve your effectiveness, and lead to greater personal fulfillment. And in the end, and I mean this truly, even if the only life you better is your own, even if this only makes you feel good and has no other impact, that's success in my book. That's it. Next slide. Thank you.
That was excellent, Melissa. I think that some of the things I took away from that were that what you just instructed everybody about or enlightened them really are life skills, because you can apply that, a lot of those things that you said, to life itself and how you handle different problems and making decisions. So it's not only the advocacy part, but it's transferring those to your everyday life and future goals. So very well done. And I think, well, we got a question from Brittany. Is Brittany here? No, but she submitted this to you, Melissa. How to handle care providers who seem more interested in getting people into their clinic than actually treating the condition and symptoms. So how does that advocacy work for somebody who's getting frustrated with their providers not providing them?
Well, I mean, it kind of depends on the reason that this is happening. And I think you have to try to figure out, why is this happening? And is there a failure of communication? Am I playing a part in that failure of communication? So I think, start by assessing that. And if that's the case, well, then you can do things like write a list of questions down in advance of going into your provider's office. So maybe write down the top 3 things or something that you want to address today. And when you go in there, make sure that you're covering those top 3 things, write them down so that you remember, and also so that the doctor knows you're serious. These are the things I want to talk about. And excuse me, and here comes throat problems. And if your doctor is not communicating well with you, excuse me, perhaps you can stop and say to him, I'm really trying to make this work. I know you're a skilled physician, but I need you to communicate with me better. I'm not understanding what you're saying. I don't think you're taking me seriously. I'm concerned that you're not addressing my main needs. Here are my main needs. What are the ways we can approach this so that I'm having better symptom control, or whatever it is you're seeking? If that's not working for you, if you've tried addressing this with your doctor and you still feel like you're just a number to him, like you don't matter, maybe it's time to think about switching doctors. And I know that's very difficult, especially when you're seeing a specialist. They aren't plentiful, they aren't nearby, so it can be difficult. But really, if your current doctor is not meeting your needs, what choice do you have? You have to find somebody who's going to take you serious and not just treat you as a number. In my case, I was seeing a specialist, top specialist in the state, and I felt like I wasn't getting decent care. I had asked for a transfer, and the medical association was holding that up. So I just started going to my regular GI. My regular GI was not a specialist, but he was taking me seriously. He was doing everything he could to fix my problems. And I would do research on the internet, and I would take that research to him, and I'd say, I know you don't know a ton about this, but here's what I've read. And he would sit down and evaluate the medications that I brought to him and say, yes, we could try this one, or no, I don't think we should do this one because it wouldn't be really good in your particular medical situation. But he really was willing to look at that with me. And you have to have that kind of relationship with your doctors if you're going to get anywhere.
Thank you, Melissa. Does anyone else have a question that they want to pose to Melissa? Ellen?
Go ahead,
Hi,
Ellen.
Lisa.
Oh,
Yep.
Ellen.
What I wanted to ask you about, one of my big concerns is what's happening with research with the current administration. And I would like to know what you recommend in terms of pushing for research.
Oh, my
Really need.
goodness.
Like Melissa.
Well, I mean, um, there are groups out there who are pushing for research funding to not be cut, to be increased. Research funding to the NIH. There are some bills out there that actually push for that funding. So that's one sort of general approach you can take. You can find, I'm not sure of the number of that bill right now because it's changed with the new session of Congress, but you can find that bill out there and really push for NIH funding for gastrointestinal diseases. But even beyond that, I think you can approach nonprofits. You can hold fundraisers to try to direct research funds to people out there who are doing important research. And you can find some of those. I know some of the nonprofits keep a list of some of the research that's being done out there, but you can also find them on PubMed and some of the major medical university sites. And if you see a researcher that you think is promising, you're trying to get some funds raised for that person. Try to direct the nonprofit funding towards there, or do personal fundraisers for them. So that's one approach. Like we've had this difficulty right now with the FDA dropping the domperidone expanded access program. And these things are very difficult because you approach agencies like that, and they're often not as responsive as you would hope they would be. So it's difficult as a patient to try to tackle those issues. And I really think that the only way to do that is to get mass support for what you're doing. You have to get other people involved. You have to write Congress. You have to write the FDA. You have to do fundraising on your own. And I know that's not a this changes everything tomorrow kind of answer, but I really think it's the only way to make significant change when you don't have an administration or whatever that you don't feel is important or is taking it as important as they should.
Thank you.
Mary Angela,
Yes,
Mark sent me information yesterday. I don't know, I haven't checked any of this out or anything, but he said there's funding through something that Mark Zuckerberg, he said that's one, and it has something to do with gastro dysmotility, and he said another one is Bill Gates. So whatever, whoever can use that.
there's no question, we have a lot of work to do, but it's not only on a grand macro scape, but it's also that micro and mini micros that you have to do in order to navigate your health in the medical field. And it's taking action there. And I know, Melissa, you know this very well, that you have some people who are very confident and outspoken. You have other people that really want to make a difference, but their self-esteem is low. They've been crushed so many times and discouraged, or they're timid. What advice can you give those people who really want to try to advocate? They're trying to do their goals, but they've been beaten down so many times, and they don't have that confident spirit or that big voice like Pam has that can just say what's on their mind. Do you have any advice for those people? And then the second part is, it is very easy to get discouraged and fatigued from all that work, but keep on trying, and taking a breath is not a bad thing, as you had indicated. Melissa, can you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard for me. I'm not timid. I'm not one of those people who doesn't like to speak up. So it is a hard thing for me to address personally when someone comes to me in that situation. Because to me, it's like, well, stop being timid. But I know it's not that easy. I see how much they try, and I know it's not as simple as that, because they have been mocked, they have been berated, they have been dismissed, and that's their experience. Well, that's not my experience, but that's their experience. And they're hesitant to speak up because they don't want to experience that again. They have been beaten down. And so, what I've tried to tell people, and I don't know, I'm not sure how successful this is or not, but I've tried to tell them, okay, if you don't know how to say it, maybe there's somebody out there who does know how to say it, who's saying it, and you like it. You like their approach. They're saying just what you need to say, and they're sort of a voice for you. Share their material. Don't be shy about that. Absolutely don't be shy about that. Share what they're saying and say, I've had people post things and say, this is exactly what I want to say, but I didn't know how to say it. And then they post from somebody else who said it. That can be very successful. Or again, do some sort of behind the scenes work. If you don't feel comfortable interacting with the public, maybe do some volunteer work for a volunteer organization like AGMD, who will be that voice for you, but you're still supporting them. I know we don't really stuff envelopes anymore, but something like stuffing envelopes, you're still contributing that way, but you are not having to put yourself in a position where I'm out there public facing and I might get attacked. And the other thing I would say is if you do want to change that, if you want to start taking those steps and make yourself a little, speak out a little more, start very small. Put out something personal, something that you know something about, something that you're very confident in saying, and share it with family, share it with social media, wherever you feel comfortable sharing it, and then sort of grow from there. When I first started advocating, I mean, I was so sick I could barely hold my head up. I knew nothing about gastroparesis. I was sent away from the doctor with no information at all. I had my personal story. That's all I had. And I posted that on my Facebook page. And I was so scared to do it. But I thought, people have got to know this exists. And so I did it. I posted it. And I was just overwhelmed with the positive response I got and the empathy I got from doing that. And that gave me confidence to move on and do bigger things, other things. So I'm not saying that's going to be everybody's experience, but I think that if you start really small like that, with things that you do feel comfortable and confident about, that will help you.
Definitely.
Mary Angela, can I make one more request? Can you put up that micro and macro one more time, the first page? So I was taking pictures instead of taking notes. I took pictures of all the screens. I
All
think I
right,
missed
let's
it.
see if I can.
Mary Angela, would you mind if I ask something in the meantime?
Oh, gosh, no.
Hi,
Please.
Daniel. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
hi.
Yep,
I'm
that's
sorry
it.
if you guys felt as if I had been an intrusion here, but let me just very briefly introduce
Got
myself. I know Melissa actually from her advocacy work. I'm a gastroenterologist in Maastricht in the Netherlands, so all the way on the other side of the ocean. And I haven't met Melissa personally, but we actually worked together on a letter that we sent to one of the journals on related to patient advocacy. And I just coincidentally saw, I think it was on LinkedIn, Melissa, that you were giving this talk, and was very interested in actually what you had to tell. And like Mariangela said, I mean, this was also inspiring to anyone, not just wanting to be involved in patient advocacy. So I was just actually thinking of some things that are also related to my personal goals, also as a professional or as a person just generally. So I think that's really inspiring. And I wish that this is just a very small group. I didn't know how many people would attend this meeting, but because I don't know you guys that well, but I think if we were to be able to find like a thing that your message can be augmented and also heard on on this side of the ocean, that would be really very beneficial. Because at least my impression is that there's really this disconnect between patients and physicians, in the sense that we oftentimes have different goals, which may be personal, professional, or else. And I'm struggling to actually bringing these two things together, also from professional point of view for my colleagues. And that's why I found Melissa so inspiring. And also whatever you post on Twitter and LinkedIn, and that's I think this visibility is very, very important. And I do have the impression sometimes that we're at something like a dead end almost for gastroparesis, because not necessarily just as FDA misery that you guys are in on that side of the ocean, but more in terms of developing new therapies, new drugs, or whatever else that is going to help patients. And the question I'd like to ask you, Melissa, if you're okay with that, if I do, is what would your idea or recommendation be as to how can we actually bring patients and doctors together to address common challenges and set up, for instance, a research agenda? Because it's not going to help if doctors want to do this and patients want to do that, and in the end effect, we're not going to end up finding any solution, because we're not actually turning in the right direction together.
Yeah, oh, I appreciate your kind comments and the question. And what he's not telling you all is that he is one of the good guys. He is one of the doctors who pays attention on social media and really tries to listen to patients, and takes us seriously and believes what we're telling him. I think it is going to take people like you who are willing to step forward and say something's wrong here. We do have this disconnect, and we need to be incorporating patient input. And I know in our specific letter we talked about that, how when you have a group working on a project, working on a research or some guidelines or whatever they're working on, a medical group, and they don't even put a patient at the table, that's problematic, because they're saying to patients, you have nothing of value. You have nothing to say, no personal experience that could benefit us. We know what's best, and we're going to tell you what's best. And it's going to take a willingness to listen to patients like that. And on the patient part, it's going to take a willingness to acknowledge that these doctors do have some good information. They have skills, they have experience, they've been to medical school, and they do know what they're talking about sometimes. And some of them do want to help patients. It shouldn't be this adversarial relationship. It should be a collaboration to create the best sort of care you can for the patient. I would love to see, and it's very difficult when you throw in the international aspect, but I would love to see some sort of in-person conference, maybe virtual, so that more people could attend and so that we could make it international. But I would love to see something where there's a patient panel that can actually, address doctors personally. We could have a back and forth between them about what we think the needs are, what needs are not being met. And then maybe the doctors could tell us, here's how we can meet those, or here's what we're doing to try to meet those. Because I just don't think there's enough of an information exchange there. I think that there are a lot of doctors that are doing things that patients just don't know about. There's a lot of research being done that we don't get to see. We run into paywalls when we try to go into journals and those sorts of things, so we don't get the information. But I also think just that acknowledgement that you're making, that sometimes it feels like we're at a dead end and there's no progress being made, just to sit down and discuss, how can we make some progress? Where have we gone wrong? Or how can we re-steer this ship so that we're headed in the right direction? That would be amazing. I don't know how to accomplish that exactly, but
Yeah, well, yeah. So I think, I mean, and obviously this, I'm not sure how long you guys have, but this was also meant as a question to all of you. So Melissa, you've been very strong with engaging politicians. That's also what you mentioned in your talk. So I was wondering whether you or the organization has been in contact with societies, GI societies of what kind and whatever, to actually try to get this connection between ourselves. Because I have and do apologize. I do apologize if I'm not well known in your area or whatever you've been operating in, more from an organizational point of view, simply because I'm located in Europe. But I have the impression that there are certain elements within the stakeholder field who are always being contacted, like the IFFGD, for instance, who I've heard of far more often than you guys. In all honesty, the reason I've come across is because of Melissa's activity. So do we have kind of like a number of people or you know or organizations that we can talk to actually have this thing running? Because I do think that if something is moving in the States, then it will more or less automatically affect everybody else also on this side. I'm not saying that this is the way this should be, but I'm just saying that that's oftentimes what happens.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes we run into the problem that we have very good nonprofits, but there's sort of overlapping work and it's difficult for them to collaborate sometimes and sort of get a unified plan in place, a unified plan of action. And that is something that I know that all the nonprofits are working on, that we can, get together and build something so that we can have a unified approach and possibly I'm in personal contact with the ANMS and the AGA,
Okay.
and some other organizations. I get mixed response from them. Sometimes I get a response and sometimes I don't get a response. But I have tried to push them to just include patients more,
Yeah. Well, it
to
really,
have.
sorry to interrupt, but it really depends on who you actually talk to and what type of person is your primary contact. And it's a bit of a thing of luck as to who you're gonna reach out to. And I have the impression, I'm relatively young, if I may say of myself, but the more older generation physicians are not very much used to giving too much room for patients to actually talk about what their ideas or needs or concepts or whatever ever are. And so maybe is it like a theoretical option? Because I understand that Antera has funded some of this educational activity. So let's say that, because nonprofits are going to face the same problems, and so societies like the NMS, they're chronically short of money as well. But if we were to find a party like Antera or whatever else, who would facilitate this kind of interaction, whether it's just an online meeting or whatever, just to get things started. Maybe if it's along one of the meetings that the gastroenterologist would organize anyhow, to have this like a satellite thing or something like that, to actually have this connection between patients and physicians or healthcare professionals, to actually have this kind of like a research agenda, or let's talk to what the priorities should be from our perspective. So I think that we should try to get something rolling. And in all honesty, I was once again very much inspired by your activity, Melissa. So I this is just an open question, whether you guys think that this would be something that would be worth trying.
Yes.
I think that would be wonderful. Yes, Mary Angela and I have talked about that. We talked about that a year ago, about trying to set up some kind of round table or summit where we could get some interested parties, people who were really interested in changing the situation and developing some research goals, some patient interaction goals. And I'm going to turn it over to her so she can speak to that. But I just think that would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and sorry if you guys get the impression that I'm taking over your whole meeting or whatever.
Oh my
So
gosh,
that's
no.
definitely
We're
that was
we're
definitely
very
not.
glad. I just want to reflect on a couple of things that you said. We were organized in 1991, and we had our first symposium in 1997. And it was the first of its kind to focus on GI motility diseases and disorders. But we brought together physicians, nurses, nutritionists, pharmaceutical patients, and families. And it was a 3-day function. And I had world-renowned speakers. And I got questioned at first. And one of the gurus of motility at the time, Dr. Raj Goyal, he was on our board. And towards the end of the program, he took me aside and he said, I really didn't think this was going to work, having patients and family intertwine with the medical gurus and everybody else for 3 days in the same setting. You were just in that room. And it was such a success. So then the following time when we had a symposium, we started to have continuing education credits, which we worked with the University of Kansas Medical continuing education. And that brought forth a lot more in the medical, scientific, nutritional communities, pharmaceutical, all together with patients and families. So it brought it in more because now they were getting credit for going. And we did that for several years. Dr. McCallum was, who just passed away, he was instrumental in facilitating that. And we wanted to do that again, perhaps virtually. Also, another goal that we have for next year is to combine more international with United States, along with pediatric. So now we have a blend of everything, with the hub being the Association of Gastrointestinal Motility Disorders. So that's our macro goal. How's that, Melissa? And we're taking these micro steps to get there. And really, Melissa has been instrumental in this organization and doing so much, a lot of it behind the scenes that people don't even realize. She's our public policy and outreach director, but that's just a small step in everything that she does. And we're just so grateful to have her. She is really one of the pulses of this organization. So I think working together and having those goals as our objectives is not unattainable. It's just figuring out that process and then moving forward with it. And of course, Melissa, you're always willing to work with us. And Doctor, we'd love to have you on board with this as well.
Yeah, so once again, so I'm not trying to push myself into anywhere, but it's just because I was
too bad, too late.
Yeah, too late. Yeah. But because I was once again really very much inspired by Melissa, and that was one of the reasons that I reached out to her for this particular letter that we wrote. And this has been bugging me, so to speak. And when I see patients, I hear their stories, obviously, and have the feeling when I talk to my colleagues and like address this. So I've several times already asked for like this is something like a satellite symposium along one of these big meetings you did, DDW or something like that, and they're just saying the same thing that you just said, Mary Angela. The doctors and patients don't belong together in this
Right.
setting, and I just do not understand that. And maybe because I just have another way of thinking about that, or another way of approaching it. So if there is a way that we could work together, because obviously apparently we have the same goals in this respect. So if we can work together on that, and I have close contact with UEG, which is the European organization, the European United European Gastroenterology, and I do have contacts with the European Society of Neurogastroenterology, so that's like the European counterpart of the ENMS. And I think that if we push hard enough, and if we push long enough, then eventually also the physicians will come to the conclusion that there's no other way than doing this. So I really if there's a way that we can work together on that, then I'm very, very much open for
Definitely. And we can push. Melissa, you can push.
I can push. And I'm going to massacre your last name, but Dr.
You could just say Daniel. That's fine.
Daniel.
Yeah, that's how I
much
go.
easier.
That's how I go.
Notice I danced around that too, Melissa.
Daniel is doing wonderful work out there, and again, he's being very humble here, but he has taken the lead really in trying to get patient voices heard. And I've mentioned your name in writing
Okay,
to
great.
Miss Angela many times about trying to get you to speak or work with us. And really this time was just a time issue, just a timing issue, and the difference between European clocks and Americans. But you're one of the ones I've mentioned that's really out there doing some significant things. And I think it'd be wonderful. I attended DDW Digestive Week a couple of years ago, and I attended on behalf of the AGA as sort of a press, a journalist, which isn't my strong suit, but I did attend some of the educational meetings as a patient, and I found them significantly helpful. I mean, I shared those on social media with my communities, and I think the overwhelming feeling was, why can't we come to something like this? This is completely beneficial to patients, and we would love to be here. So maybe if they could incorporate some kind of patient panel into that DDW or a meeting like that, or just even some sort of mingling event where we can get together and meet, even if it wasn't official, that would be great.
Let's do it. How's that? Got me convinced. Doesn't take much. I
You
just
know, I would be interested too, so I would
Oh.
help.
excellent, excellent. I'm sure all of our advocates are going, yeah, count me in, count me in.
I know we're running over, but I believe Miss Pam had a question.
Oh,
Yes, I just wanted to ask a question. So, I found this group through the Oli Foundation. This group has literally saved my life. I was so isolated and alone before I found this group for a very long time with my illness, with not much education about it or how to treat it. And especially in the area that I'm in. But what I wanted to ask, and it's based on what Melissa and Daniel were saying, have you guys ever done maybe annual conferences or maybe online sessions of different topics or something? And I would even love to see you guys do sessions at the Oli Foundation. That's something that I do once a year, their annual conference. But this group is so needed for motility disorders, because I have found nothing else like this.
yeah. Thank you, Pam. We used to, when Joan Bishop was involved in the organization, she no longer is, and her team, so it's all new people, we exhibited, and so we participated in a lot of the virtual things together. And the last one I did was on, actually, I think it was gastroparesis, and I helped organize it with them in doing that, which was really an honor for me. So yes, definitely. We are broadening next year. Next year is our 30th year here. So we're going to be doing, hopefully, prayerfully, health, staying with me, a lot more things. And Melissa certainly is going to be involved. And we have other volunteers who are going to be involved too, like Kristen and Letitia. You think you've seen them. So absolutely, I'm excited. I will be in touch with you, doctor. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your name. You don't have to pronounce mine either. And Melissa, I always close these programs the same way, but Melissa, you are outstanding. I think the world of you. You have been so important in this organization and continue to be. You wear so many hats in this organization. She proofreads those magazines too. That's not in her title. She always, eagle eyes, I call her. So,
But I like doing that.
so I want to, you are all my heroes. Melissa, of course, you are. And Dr. Daniel, you are. And all of you patients are my heroes. And for you patients, you are the ones that are my heroes, because you are living this life with all your suffering every single day of your life. I call you quiet heroes, because the world may not know about what you do every day and how much it must take for you to get through that day when you're feeling nauseous or vomiting or fatigued, or you just don't feel right. You can't eat. There's so many things, these motility disorders just infiltrate into every aspect of your life. And you may feel alone, but you're not alone, because this organization is here for you. And you have doctors like Dr. Daniel who are there for you, and Melissa, who is our advocate, who is there even on social media for us. But I'm also with you. My heart is with you every single day. I think of you every single day and know that each and every day of my life, I pray for you all. May God bless you all. Thank you again. Thank you, Melissa. Terrific job. Thank you all. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.